Hey church, I've got to talk about something to start with that we haven't talked about in a while. See this little open space here? I'm standing on our Bennett Road property where the Ush meets, and this is our property, and we've got this open space here where we're discerning whether or not to build a building on there. And I've talked personally about what I think God is doing, and I think God could very well be wanting us to build this building, and I say that based on a lot of what I feel God is doing with our presence here in the suburb. And God is doing something with our church and this suburb. We are in the last 5 years or so, we're more deeply involved in more schools. We have Jess, who we're interviewing today, who's a chaplain in 2 schools. We do scripture in 2 schools. We now have a strong and growing relationship with an Ush that serves over 120 families in the community, and we do stuff together with them. And just on that, Kathy, the wonderful Christian lady who oversees this business, is passionate about that relationship and has actually approached me about wanting to deepen our relationship, church and Ush, how we can even do more together. So how good's that? And our youth ministry has evolved into something that's very centered on local kids, and we've seen commitments to Jesus being made. We've seen just relationships form with kids that are from St. Clair, and so it just seems to be what God is doing, and I think the idea of having a space which can serve us as we try and serve the community and can bless the community just seems to make sense. And so that conversation went off the boil for a while, as a lot of things did because of COVID. But hey, September 20th, I'm asking members to set aside just from about 1 p.m. to 1:30 so they can gather on this property to vote whether or not to give the building committee access to the funds so they can attack a DO process. We were close to doing this pre-COVID, but we just didn't get around to it. But this needs to happen so they can continue and explore what we can and can't do. And if we can apply for grants and all this, basically this is going to happen. We need this step to take place. And it's also a skin in the game moment. So if you're with me and discerning that we should take this step, you can come and throw your hand up. But also we're going to remind people of the discussion thus far and have some extra ways so people can discern if they need a bit more jotting of their memory. They can arrive prepared to vote. There'll be a Zoom call before that meeting on the 20th on a Thursday night where people can ask extra questions if they have any, or hear from the building committee. But yeah, just asking members to be aware of that so we can continue that journey. I'm so excited. I'm across here from Macca's, and I'm just excited at this project, and I believe that God has continued to open doors. The architect that's done so much pro bono work for us in the background continues to posture himself to help us. I'm going to introduce him to you in the next couple of weeks. His name is Shane. So look out, please, for communications about this. And if we get over this hurdle, this first big skin in the game step, the process can actually move forward at a rate of knots, and we can push this thing along, Lord willing, and as far as God wants to go. And if many of you increased your giving when we started talking about the need for a more robust budget around that time, you increased your giving, and I know that for some of you that was a show of support for us heading in this direction as a church. But there's now also, on top of that, we do have a more robust budget now. We are saving more money, and that's awesome. And over and above people's regular giving, there's now a building fund that people can give directly to if they want to show direct support for this project as well. So the details of that, look out for that as well. Thank you to those that have provided so much feedback of like, I need feedback desperately. Particularly, I'm so disconnected from so many of you. And some people have just provided feedback on the direction of the broadcast, the balance of providing a broadcast that can kind of relate well in a hub atmosphere, but also to those at home, some aspects people are struggling with. Thank you so much for coming forward. It is so helpful. It helps me just listen to God and by listening to the community about how I can best serve you, and also how we as a church can maybe do things better at this time. So thank you for those that have come forward with feedback of many different sorts recently. I just want to encourage you that in all the mess of everything we're doing, God is doing some amazing things. I've heard some really, really good stories. I mean, you've heard some of them. In this season, God's kingdom work is still being done. I hear really good things in the hubs, great leadership being shown, and you know, great discipleship happening. Some of our, for some people, the hubs have been amazing, and it's just been really, really good. And thank you to those that are persevering and joining us online at home, and thank you for the people that have provided feedback to how I can and how we as a church can better serve people in that situation. So just thank you. And there's just so many good things happening as well, I can just assure you. And I've been trying to share some of those stories with you, and we'll continue to try and share them as well. On a personal note, thank you to those who have been praying for our family. There's a couple of things to pray for. First is really exciting. We're moving to St. Clair. We believe God is doing something here. We believe we're called here. We're moving here. We're selling our house in Plumpton. That's nearly happened, and we're going to move here. We're going to buy a house here, and God willing, and yeah. So pray for that. Pray that God leads us here to the right home and the right and to a place that will be a blessing to us and a blessing to St. Clair and a blessing to God's kingdom work here. But also, you would have heard, many of you, and if you haven't, you'll hear about it now, that Esther has been diagnosed with a kidney disease, and that has ramifications that we're still coming to grips with, and has potential risk factors with other things. And so she has a brain scan this Tuesday to kind of rule out some of the other things that can happen in association with this. But also, there are some other things that we're still coming to grips with. So continue to just pray for our family as we, process that and work that out. And thank you to so many people have contacted us and surrounded us in their love and support and prayers. And we appreciate that so much. And we need it. We need it as much as anyone. We are people who need others, absolutely. All right, so just in terms of what's coming up, we're about to have an interview with Jess O'Brien, who is our chaplain across 2 schools now. So really looking forward to sharing with you what she's been up to. And then we have a teaching from Esther, so we look forward to that too. In terms of the spoken worship exercises, hubs can now do those at their own leisure in and around the broadcasts. Just as a way of being inclusive for those that are joining in from home as well. Okay. All right. As you can see, I'm here with Jess. Hey, Jess.
Hello.
Hey. Now, some of you may not have seen Jess for a while. That's because a couple of months ago now, she came back from something in Queensland. Remind people, what were you doing in Queensland, Jess? What were you doing?
I went and did the DTS, the Discipleship Training School with YWAM, Youth with a Mission, in Sunshine Coast. Yeah, okay. At the end of January, I went off, yeah. And
that was meant to involve international mission as well, right?
Yes, it was. But obviously we couldn't do that. My team was meant to go to 5 different countries. And then, it all hit, and we just ended up doing it in Sunshine Coast, which actually ended up being really nice and a real blessing actually to our team. And yeah.
Awesome. That's so good. So if you want to know more about what I just got out of that, you can always chat to her and ask her. But we're here to talk about what you've been up to lately. So we had Keith serve our church at Banks, and Katie serving at our church, both in a sort of temporary way at Blackwell as chaplains. And And Jess has stepped into both roles now. So she is our chaplain extraordinaire at Banks and Blackwell. So two schools where she is the chaplain of our church in those schools. So before I ask how it's going and things like that, why did you take that on when you came back?
Yeah. So the end of last year, I finished my social work degree, and I was just kind of like, obviously, when you're coming to the end of it, you're kind of thinking, oh, what am I going to do next? And I just felt really discontent with the idea of going straight into just a social work role, for like numerous reasons. But yeah, I just felt really unsettled about it, and so then kind of thought, oh, maybe I should just do something like outside, like kind of what I did with YWAM, really, basically, I was thinking about. And that's why I kind of decided to go and do a DTS. But I guess before, as I made that decision, you had come up and asked, oh, like this opportunity has come up, would you want to be a chaplain? And because I'd already made the decision to go to YWAM, I was like, oh yeah, like it sounds like something I would really love to do. Is there a possibility of me doing it when I get back? And we kind of talked about that with the schools and with each other, and that worked out. But I guess it kind of was something that I was like, yeah, I think it's well suited towards what like I like, and it was helpful that I had done social work, even though it's not a social work role. Like, definitely can be what I learned will inform a lot of what I'm doing as a chaplain. And just I think it's a good balance. Like, I can't proselytize to the kids, like tell the gospel to the kids or anything like that, but I just feel like it's more of this balance between like faith and work, and which was something I felt really discontented about in like finishing up social work. Was like, oh, like it's so great that there's systems in place to help people, but people just need Jesus. And like like it just made it really hard for like, how do I balance that in a social work role? And like that's still there in chaplaincy, but I think I don't know, I just think it's a bit easier to balance that a little bit more. And just working with kids, yeah, like normally I can get along fairly well with most kids, and so that was a big drawing point as well. And I just pretty much get to have fun and hang out with kids for a job, so that's pretty good.
That's awesome. And so what are you doing so far in the two schools? How's your role different in both?
Yeah, so at Banks, I am working mostly with stage 3, so year 5 and year 6. And I'm kind of going in and almost working as a teacher's aide, almost sometimes when I'm going into the classroom. So like just sitting alongside the kids who might be struggling a bit more with certain things, and trying to help out where I can. And also just being a presence. Like, I feel like I'm not actually doing that much, to be honest, because I'm just kind of trying to build relationships. And so sometimes I'm feeling like I don't know what I'm actually bringing to the schools, but I am just trying to be a presence and trying to build relationships. And I guess at Banks, I'm doing like at playgrounds, I'm just trying to connect with different groups in sport. So like playing basketball one lunch, and soccer another, and footy another, and just trying to do be active in different groups. And yeah,
and then something you'd enjoy.
Yeah, something it's really fun, and it's great because like the kids at Banks, the year 6s, they're all pretty small. So when they ask me to play basketball, I'm just good because I'm taller than them. That's a nice bonus. And then at Blackwell, I'm working more with the kindies. And so, again, there's a lot of, like, I guess, high needs in the kindergarten classes at the moment at Blackwell. So, like, really just, again, kind of like a teacher's aide when I'm in the classroom, like just trying to get alongside the kids who are not necessarily struggling, like, academically, but like just have hard home life and find it hard to like emotionally regulate. So just trying to like get alongside them and pretty much, yeah, just try and helping them to be less distracting for the teacher, so the other kids can be present. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds fun. and a little stressful maybe at times, but kindy kids are cute, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I suppose, like you say, you're not doing much, but, kind of trying to be relational, build and have presence. And certainly in terms of the goals of our church, right? You can't be almost like an evangelist in that sense, but I have no doubt that as we serve the community as the church, that you actually become an important bridge for us into the community, a bridge of favor, a bridge of trust as well. And so, we've already, before you at Banks, we've used that relational bridge that Laura and Keith built up, to do hampers and barbecues and things, and so it's just just want to encourage you that when you say just building relationships and being present, I kind of go, well, I hope that's awesome if that's the main thing you're doing, because we want that relational connection into the school. What's a couple of prayer points so that I can pray for you?
Yeah. I guess my prayer has been, as I'm going into the schools, that God would just be leading me in each of my interactions, because I just don't know, when I'm with these little kindergarten kids who are just, it's really rough for them at home, I don't know what they need at that moment. I don't know whether they need to have a firm word or to have a gentle heart, or I just, because I don't know exactly where they're at, I can presume, and but for me to actually be led by the Spirit and be just that God would be using me to love these kids where they need. That's a big prayer point, I think, because I don't know, and just that He's opening doors, and I've already seen that. Chris, the principal at Blackwell, asked me to get alongside this girl because it's been really rough for her at home, and she's not in kindy, so I was I don't know how to find her or get alongside her. She'd be who's this strange lady who's just randomly come up to me? But God really opened that door, and it was really natural. And I just found her by accident almost, and and there's a group of them, so I was able to get alongside her and not be intentionally picking her out. And but then she just I did nothing, and she just opened up and just wanted to talk to me and be my friend at the end. And so but I did absolutely nothing, so I just know that was just God that was opening those doors, so just to continue opening those doors. And and I think also just I don't want to be complacent in where I'm at. I want to keep I think building relationship is really important at this stage, but I also don't want to use it as a crutch of not doing more things, and stepping out into different stages, and just because I've become comfortable in those stages, not just wanting to stay there because it's easy at the moment, but but also doing it in an appropriate way where I'm not stepping on any teachers' toes, or just stepping out into different areas of the school, I think, and being a presence for all the kids, and not just the kids that I've gotten to know.
Yeah, so good. Well, I will pray for that, and I'll pray that that actually in that spirit of not wanting to be complacent, that you continue to be filled with vision and imagination of how God can use this role, to further His kingdom as well. So on behalf of the church, I'll pray for you, if that's all right. Dear Lord, we thank you so much that you open doors, and we thank you that in the last season at St. Clair, you just opened up so many doors into the community, and two of those doors are these being able to have chaplains in 2 local schools, or 1 chaplain in this case. We thank you for the pioneering work of Laura, Katie, and Keith in these roles, and the favour that built up. We thank you that Jess is now in there. We pray you would answer her prayer, that she would have wisdom in each situation with each kid to know how to love. And we also just and pray that you would give her the right words to say and the right and help her, just protect her, I suppose, from anything that might derail her ministry in the schools. Just keep her safe and fill her with wisdom as she serves you. I pray give her favor with the kids and favor with the staff. And we just also pray that you would continue to open up doors for her and continue to give her favor in ways which allow her to have real positive relationships in the school. And we also just pray for just our connection to her as a church. We just pray that you would fill her with vision and imagination as to how this positive relational bridge can be used to further your kingdom in really good ways. And we thank you for Jess's willingness and her obedience in stepping into this role. And we pray you would just bless her, and thank you that she's been able to give us this time this morning. Amen.
Thanks, Nick.
Hey church, I just want to say a big thank you to all of you. I know many have been praying for me about my health things this week, and I just know that prayer makes a massive difference, and I'm so thankful for you. And I've been feeling really loved and cared for by the messages coming in and by the prayers that you have been praying. So thank you for that. Let's get straight into the teaching. Today I'm teaching from Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 to 21, which is the feeding of the 5,000. So that's going to come up in a second, so let's read together. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place. It's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said. Then he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 baskets of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. There are so many wonderful things to hone in on in this passage. First, we see this practice of retreat. Now, in this passage, Jesus is retreating because John the Baptist has just been killed and he's gotten that news. So he's retreating in a time of grief. But throughout the New Testament, we see that the practice of retreat, solitude, and prayer are just natural rhythms in Jesus' life. In this passage, we also see Jesus' compassionate heart. Even though he's in a deep time of grief, when the crowds come and find him, he responds in love. He heals their sick, and later we see that he feeds them. And the other thing we see, of course, is that a massive miracle is performed. Jesus feeds thousands of people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. But today, I don't want us to hone in on those things. We're not going to be honing in on the retreating, on the compassion, or the fact that an incredible miracle takes place. I want us to hone in on how this miracle takes place. So jumping straight into it, although Jesus is responsible for this incredible miracle happening, he doesn't perform it as a one-man team. We'll talk about why this is significant soon, But first, let's have a closer look at some of the passage. So I'm just going to read again from verses 15 to 17. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place. It's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." They say, "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." Now in verses 15 and 16, the disciples see a problem, namely that it's getting late, people need food. They also offer a solution. They say, well, let's send the crowds away. They can go to a village and buy themselves things to eat. Jesus doesn't agree with the solution to the problem here, but instead of saying, "Don't worry, I'll feed them," he says, "You feed them." Here, Jesus is inviting them into what is about to take place. He's inviting them into the miracle that's about to happen. He won't be feeding the 5,000 alone. They will be feeding the 5,000 together. Let's have another look at verses 17 to 21. "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said, Jesus, and he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 baskets of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. We see that the disciples have responded to Jesus saying, "You feed them," because they've gathered intel. They say, well, we have 5 loaves, we have 2 fish. And then Jesus takes that food that the disciples gather, he prays over it, and again, he invites the disciples into what is about to take place. He asks them to give the food to the people. And as the disciples give these 5 loaves and 2 fish to the thousands of people that are there, not only are they able to feed all of them, there are 12 baskets of food left over. Isn't that crazy? The impossible was accomplished. And this big moment is one that is shared between Jesus and his followers, between the master and the apprentice, between the discipler and the disciple. And this is not the only time that we see this happen. Throughout the New Testament, we see Jesus walking with his disciples, doing life with them and teaching them and giving them opportunities to participate with him in the work he has come to do. This is significant. Why is it significant? Because it teaches us 2 things. And the first thing is this. In the same way that Jesus invited his disciples back then to participate with him in his kingdom work, he invites us to do the same now. This kingdom work that we're called to do is also kingdom work that we're asked to do with him. So when I think about this, these are some of the questions that come to mind for me. Do I have my eyes open when Jesus is inviting me to participate with him in his kingdom work? Am I ready to step out in obedience when he calls me into that? I mean, Jesus was asking his disciples to feed thousands of people with the tiniest amount of food. It seems silly, it seems impossible, but they do it, and he does it with them. And so that's the question I ask myself. Am I ready to step out in obedience when he calls me into something, no matter what obstacles I see? And the other question I ask when I think about that is, when I do step out in obedience and participate with him in this work, will I seek to do it on my own? Or will I do it with him the way we're supposed to do it? The last question is usually the biggest struggle for me, and I think for many in the church. When Jesus asks us to do something and we step out in faith to do it, we can often carry it on our own shoulders. We can often seek to do it in our own strength. And this leads to sometimes resentment, sometimes exhaustion, sometimes an inability to do the task. And so this is just a reminder to us that feeding the 5,000 wasn't something the disciples did alone. It wasn't something Jesus did alone. He invited them into it, and then he did it with them. And they did it with him. He's the one who took the food and prayed for it. He's the one that gave it to the disciples and asked them to give it to the people. It is work they did together. So when Jesus asks us to step into something, we need to do it with him. We don't need to carry it alone. And that is a beautiful and good thing. So I want to encourage us. Our natural instinct, first of all, can be to not step into obedience sometimes. So one, let's do that. But number two, when we do step into obedience and step into whatever it is God's calling us to, let's do it with him. He's right there. And we need him. And we know that. So as we move to action, let's do it with him. The second reason this is significant is that as we look to Jesus as the master discipler who we want to imitate, we see principles in how we are to disciple others. The way Jesus discipled meant that things never stopped with him. He gave his disciples on-the-job training, allowing them to hear, see, and experience the way he did his kingdom work, and asking and giving them opportunities to step into that kingdom work with him. He didn't just sit and give them sermons. He didn't just simply tell them, here, do this. He showed them how, he taught them how, while they did life together. And he invited them into these spaces. He sat alongside them and he demonstrated the how. He didn't say do this. He said, this is how I do this. Here, can you do this? I'm going to invite you into that. He gave them opportunities. He exposed them to the way he did kingdom work, the way he did mission. One of the things Jesus does here as he performs this miracle with his disciples is that he's announcing God's reign. He's showing God's power, which is a big part of what evangelism and mission is about, showing that God is king. And as he does that through miracles, he invites his disciples into that. He demonstrates how the work is done and he invites them into it. An example of this in our own church are the individuals who have been at the forefront of advocating for social justice. They live it out and they tell us how they do it and why they do it. But we also get a glimpse into how, because they share some of the practices. Well, we don't eat this for these reasons. And they invite us into that. We encourage you to think about the kind of chocolate and coffee and clothes and things you buy. Now, that small group of people who were advocating for this stuff years ago, that group has grown bigger and bigger because they didn't just do it. They discipled people into that. I hope that makes sense. Another example of this is Nate reading the Bible with people of peace in his life. Now, this is a missional habit that didn't come from nowhere. It's actually come from practices that we see in the Bible that then someone has taken on, and someone else has influenced Nate in these missional habits. And Nate's then been able to influence Kiara and Johnny, as you heard last week, and others outside our church too, actually, who've begun that missional habit. And it's not the only missional habit, but it's an effective one. And instead of the person who influenced Nate keeping that to themselves and going, well, that's how I do things, he was able to influence Nate into that. Nate was able to influence others into that. It's this whole thing where we disciple by demonstrating the way we are disciples, the way we do mission, and inviting others into that space too. demonstrating it, giving them opportunities. And so and I want us to get real here, because none of us are lacking in strengths and gifts and ways we do things. We all have gifts, we all have strengths, we all have passions. We are a diverse body of Christ, and we can spur each other on in incredible ways. We can be discipling each other in incredible ways. If your strength is in prayer, you can be influencing others in growing in the area of prayer. If your strength is in sharing the gospel, you can be of influence in others sharing the gospel. If your strength is in coming alongside the hurting and the broken, you can influence others in coming alongside the broken and the hurting. Whatever it is that burns in your heart, whatever strengths and gifts and ways of doing life that you have, you can influence others in those things too. And this is such an important and crucial part of the discipleship journey. You know, I just think that we are so good at coming alongside people, sitting with them, teaching, sharing from our lives, asking them how they're going, so partially being supportive. And those are crucial, important things in discipling. But we're not always great at doing this thing that Jesus so clearly does. We're not always good at demonstrating the way we do life in mission and encouraging others into stepping into those things and inviting them into doing those in a way where we can influence their lives in positive ways. When Jesus teaches us things, it's never meant to stop with us. It's meant to influence others around us. We teach others, they teach us. It's the way that it works. My voice is dying for some reason. And so I guess I really want to encourage you this week. Take a moment, take some time of prayer and listening to God, some time to process, and jot down your gifts, your strengths, your passions. Write down things that bother you. All these things are things that give us insight into where we can be of influence to others as we disciple each other. Yes, I wanted to share with you, one of the ways I do this. One of the ways I try and do this. So for me, one of the ways I feel called to influence others is in coming alongside people, in helping them do life and ministry from a place of overflow. What this looks like is, in my conversations with people, I often talk about rest and grace, depending on God's grace and also having grace for ourselves. Another way is by sharing practical examples of how I honor a Sabbath day in my week, what that day looks like, and also in sharing specifically what it looks like for me to practice the habit of saying no. That's something I was awful at for years and years, but through God's grace, it's something I've been able to do better. And now it's something that I feel a responsibility to influence others in. If someone is struggling with saying no to things, how can I help them? And so I talk to them about it, I share examples, and I ask them what that might look like in their life. Another thing is I try and invite people into opportunities where they could be living life from a place of overflow by asking them to rethink their weekly habits, and by challenging them in processing why they do things, if that makes sense. I'm kind of just sharing things in my head at the moment, but I guess what I'm saying is, if I want to be of influence with a certain thing, I can't just sit back and do that. I need to be intentional about sharing those things, and intentional about asking people to rethink those things, and intentional inviting them and giving them opportunities to practice those things. Anyway, so I have so much to learn from you guys, and we have so much to learn from each other as a body of, as a church community. And so my prayer is that we're a community that enriches each other and spurs each other on in the way we disciple each other. That when Jesus does something in us, that we're people who let him do it through us. So when Jesus disciples us, we disciple others with those things in really practical, real ways. I guess as we follow Jesus and as we participate in his kingdom work together, let's be intentional. Let's be intentional about doing that in ways where we give each other opportunities to participate in that together, to participate in that with God and not apart from God, and in doing it in a way where we influence each other and spur each other on to grow. I hope all that made sense. As always, I am happy to continue these conversations offline. And so if there's something on your heart, something that stood out that you want to talk about, or if there's something you want prayer for, please reach out. I always love having those conversations. Love you guys, and look forward to seeing some of you. And I hope the hubs are going well. And I'm really enjoying our hub, which is at the Wilkinsons. And those of you who aren't in hub, I really pray that you are not feeling isolated, that your life still has community, and that there are opportunities for you to be blessed in those ways as well. Okay, love you guys.